since the challenge for this month was jigs, and it's been expanded into, like, the balance of the meeting after show and tell will be presenting your jigs, and I'll say expecting probably 9 or 10 jigs. If you limit your discussion on any given jig for maybe about 10 minutes, we can finish that up in an hour and a half, the duration of a normal demo, and get out of here by 9:30 or whatever. So before we do the jig thing, let's go ahead and look at show and tell. Anybody? You're spotlighted. Okay.
Can you see it?
Yeah. Let me, before you talk about it, Jerry does these things, these smokers. They're so clever and so complex. I don't know, what do you made, about 15 now, Jerry?
Yeah, 14 or 15. Yeah.
Go ahead. He shows them on Coffee Hour nearly every week, a new one.
Well, not quite. Anybody who goes to Coffee Hour has probably seen everything I want to show, but this is Oma. She is a German smoker. She's smoking a pipe, and the incense comes out of her mouth, and it wafts out. And I guess it took me longer to make the chair and the sheep than it did to her, but she lifts straight up at the waist, and the smoldering piece of incense sits in a bottle cap in there, and she's knitting, and my wife's a major knitter with wool that's coming right off the back of Sean the sheep. So that's Oma. She's the one I had open. I don't know if I can get the others I wanted to show you. Let's see.
Tell their size by they are all on, or most of them are mounted on cigar boxes.
Yeah, they're all of the recent ones are. I made some early ones that are single figure, and they're on a wooden stand. But I bought 40 some cigar boxes on Etsy when I was making electric cigar box guitars. I made 15 of them before I got tired of them, and so I have a lot of boxes left that weren't perfect for the guitars, but like this one right here, that I don't know what you can see. Can you see what I see?
Still seeing the old grandma.
Oh, okay. So how do I get her out of there?
Oh, we have your Alfred Hitchcock on another screen.
That's the one I want you to see. I want you to see Alfred. Is he there?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. So how do I get rid of Grandma?
Maybe stop share and then reshare with the new image.
Okay. All right. Did that happen?
There we go.
Yep.
Okay. Well, my son is works at the Library of Congress in the film division down in Culpeper, underground, and he's heavily into the movies. So my daughter suggested making a movie theme for him. So here's a pseudo Alfred Hitchcock. This cigar box is remarkable. The sides are about an inch thick, so it was really easy to work with, and extremely strong. Not resonant. It was no good for a guitar, but extremely strong. And he's well, you see, he's walnut, and then the rest of it is hardwood of whatever was on the floor. And I made that director's chair, which took longer than it did to make Alfred. So I don't know if anybody has any questions, but
You'll turn some of that and some of that you'll carve?
there's the only carving here is with a little bit around the nose with a Dremel tool. So his head is turned, and then there's I cut a profile out on jigsaw and glued that on. So this is about 1/4 of an inch wide. Just I like the ears; they're glued on too. So, but I turn it as much as I can, and I paint while it's on the lathe. It's just easier and faster to do it that way. So there's another one I'd like to show you. So let me get rid of this one. So I'll stop the share and there. Did that come up?
Yes.
It's a composite.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a glass cabinet that we bought. I didn't make it, and that has most of the ones I've made so far. In the top there's a baker, and then there's a wood turner there, and then a brewer, and then the second row down there's I call it the coachman's breakfast, and then on the right there are 3 coachmen playing cards, and you can't see it, but every one of them has an ace in his hand and another ace in his pocket. So they're good honest guys. And then you saw Oma and Alfred, and then there's my daughter suggested musicians, so there's a couple of horn blowers there, and smoke comes out of the end of the trumpet. So they have cigarettes in their mouths on the side, so they can puff in smoke and theory and then blow it out the horn. So there are others, but that's what I would like to show, and I thank you for letting me show them.
Hey, thank you for showing,
Thank you.
Jerry.
Great.
Any questions for Jerry's thing?
Yeah, Jerry, how long does it take to make one of them?
Like anything that's fun, no time at all.
Okay, I'll buy that.
Ask me how long it takes to grade papers.
Yeah.
Years. Alfred Hitchcock, I really slowed down. He took 5 weeks, but I only work a couple hours. I'm over 100 years old now, so I get tired. So actually, I'm 81, but I do get tired too soon, and I have a really terrible back, so I can only work so much. But so I work a couple of hours and then read or nap or something else. But so when I was younger, I used to work all night and then teach all day because I was having fun. But I don't have that stamina anymore, and I'm looking at the guys there, and probably a few of you don't have that stamina. But thank you for the question.
It's nice work.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Let me see. I got to get the right one, and I got to check the right boxes, and then I got to share. And I want to show you a 1:10 video, just for the fun, and then we can talk. So here goes. Use my hands a lot to feel as much as look. I need to come back up on the edge of it more. that is this bowl. And this is the top, that was the bottom. This is a slab from, I got a bunch of burls from a neighbor who took down an old cherry tree that was just loaded with burls. I came back with a truckload of burls, pickup truckload. I always start with the smallest one first, and I sliced off the burl and I had a nice chunk of cherry left over. And I said, I think this is going to be fun. And two of the neighbors here were visiting, and they said, we want to come over and watch you. So we turned this out. I had to really turn it down because there was a lot of sapwood on it. But this is the final bowl, and the turntable tried to show you the various views of it. It does have a, I made it a feature, it has a chainsaw cut on the upper edge. It was just the way the blank worked out. So that's what I wanted to show. I'm having fun because one of the people over shot a little bit video of me showing her how it was going, and I decided to intercut them. Normally I just make the turntables to show the various views, but I'm having fun with video editing. So.
All right, anybody else out there?
Nice work, Jim.
Yeah, I enjoyed that video, Jim. Thank you.
It's really nice.
Thanks.
Were those carbide tools, Jim?
What?
Was that a carbide scraper you were cutting with?
You caught me, didn't you? Yeah, I do. I like to do I don't know what you call it, an undercut. And yes, I took a carbide tool. I have a rack full of regular tools, but occasionally I reach for the carbides on the end. It was a Rikon round carbide, which negative rake, no less. And it just works nicer underneath the edge that I'm trying to get for the finger to grab the bowl. So yes, it was.
Okay. I wasn't being critical. If it wasn't for carbide tools, I think I'd make one thing a year.
Yeah, I don't know. I mix it up. Some guys get by with one gouge, and I can see how that can happen. But for me, I also didn't want to have issues with two people staying there watching me. So I knew this would do it okay, and it did. So.
Well, gouges require too much talent.
Thank you. That's exactly what.
That-
No,
that's-
it's actually not talent. It's experience. I think it's experience.
Yeah.
If you use it only for everything, you learn how to make it do everything.
So I didn't have a whole lot of time, but I wanted to try doing a hollow form. So this is my first attempt at it. And the tool I have is a little bit too big for trying to reach around the corner that I wanted to reach around. It came out okay. It's just a little bit heavy at the point area. So it's a little thick there. And then, so last month I had gotten an airbrush, and the first project I did, I masked everything off. This time I didn't mask anything off and learned how to use the airbrush better. And it all came out really well, except for my bottom. I did get some bleed in the very bottom in the texturing. But that's the nice thing about using alcohol-based dyes is you put a little more alcohol on them and they blend out nicely. So.
Are you saying that alcohol fixes everything?
It helps a lot, especially when things don't go quite as planned.
What tool were
Yeah,
you trying?
but in the shop you got to be careful which alcohol you reach for.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah.
That's true.
So, but I had fun. Learned a lot with the new tool.
What tool were you using to try to get under?
It's a Sorby hollow. I don't remember what it's called. I saw it on the wall and I grabbed it. I said, "Yeah, that's what I want." And
That was it.
yeah, except it was a little bit bigger. They make a smaller one, and I did since get the smaller one.
How do you manage to keep an airbrush from going into the other colors?
Keeping it very close and turning the air pressure way down.
What kind of an airbrush?
Harbor Freight.
Is it dual action?
Yes, it is. It's a dual action gun. And it worked well once I learned how to adjust it and watched a few videos on how to work an airbrush other than just point and shoot, which the first version that I did last month, that's what that was a point and shoot. And it came out well, but this one, I was real happy with it, that I was able to keep the color separation really well in the details.
You can get down to 1/16 of an inch with an airbrush.
Yeah, it was
Or even smaller.
between a 32nd and a 16th.
Yeah.
Just depend. The closer you get the nozzle, and the nozzle size on that one, I forget what it is, but it's not a really tiny one, but it's not a really big one.
You can get those. You can get those adjustable too.
Yeah.
I have several
Yeah.
airbrushes.
Mine's a Harbor Freight.
And did you spray it while it was on the lid or off the lid?
No, on the lathe.
On the lid.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's
What did you use to make the black grooves?
well, I did on the black grooves. I just cut a groove, and then I used the linoleum to burn it.
Formica? You mean
yeah.
Formica?
Yeah. Whatever I
That
saw.
was my go-to, but they changed the Formica formulas, and I
Yeah.
just got some new chips that wouldn't make burn for nothing.
Yeah.
And so the old style ones were really great burners that way, but I'm having trouble now.
Yeah. With this, I found that I have to turn the speed way up in order to get it to burn. If it's under 1500, it really doesn't burn. It kind of browns it, but it doesn't burn it.
That may be part of my problem too, but yeah, I went to Home Depot and asked for some chips because I ran out of them, and boy, the ones I brought back weren't doing squat.
Yeah. I have one of my sample chips that burns really well, and one of the other ones that doesn't.
Right.
So I got rid of that one, I think. I haven't seen it for a while, so I must have got rid of it. So, but yeah. Yeah, it was fun. I want to do another one, actually for somebody, a little bit bigger. I started doing one, and then my wood was a little bit too green, and it split right down. So start over.
How many did you do that you went through before you got this one?
This was the very first one.
Awesome.
One I attempted.
Awesome.
So,
What wood was that, Rick?
Huh?
What wood was that originally?
Floor wood. I really don't remember what it was.
You didn't laminate that, did you?
Huh?
You didn't laminate that.
No.
Floor wood, like.
Piece of wood off my floor. I don't know. It's probably, I want to say probably sycamore, but I'm not positive.
Was it green or dry?
Yes.
Okay.
You're not positive.
It was not green, but it wasn't dry, like dry, but there was no moisture coming out of it when I was turning it. So it was mostly dry.
It's fun when it's spraying while you're hollowing.
Yeah. Well,
And hollow is a lot easier, and to not make your life as difficult, try not to make an acute an angle, and you'd be amazed what you can pull
yeah.
off.
Well,
If you can get more of a radius inside, then you'll feel better about the discussion we had earlier about
Yeah.
your tool performance inside.
yeah.
It'll go
So,
well. You'll like it.
yeah, well, I figured that out after I shaped the outside, and I'm like, yeah, I like the shape, and then when I was working on the inside, I realized, may have been a little aggressive thought for the first time trying it. So, but I've never been afraid of trying. So,
And your grain is like spindle grain in there, or is it?
no, it's bowl grain. Yeah, it's cross grain. So, yeah.
Nice job.
We're hoping it's not perfectly beautiful wood that you went and dyed. You know, it should be floor wood if you're going to dye it.
It was just, I got junk wood. It was just a small piece that was laying there as an offcut from something. I have no idea what. So, I have a large pile of floor wood. So, some of it's a little bigger than others. So, but yeah, it was fun.
Thank you, Rick. I learned the difference in floor wood and flooring wood.
Yes.
I think John had the same impression that I had, that I was thinking, where'd you find 3-inch thick flooring? Tobacco barn or something.
Right.
Okay, that's the only one I see here. I have one as a way of introducing one of my jigs, but the coffee hour, there have been a number of people who have been doing these, I shouldn't say a number of people. I've seen a number of, Mike Peace, I know, makes several of them, the emerging bowl. If you can.
Go ahead and give it a spin. Nice. Want to spin it?
That's in the other table.
Oh, yeah. Put it in the other.
Oh, you gotta put it on this thing.
The spinny one.
It's like radar.
And it was just made to try and do one. So I had no regard for making out of nice wood. It was what I got off the floor. And I think it's maple, but you can see it's very splotchy. I did use bleach on the inside just to see how that would work, and it helped, but it is still splotchy wood. And from watching on Coffee Hour, I've seen several approaches on how different people make these things. And for me, it was, you wind up with two, because it's basically two pieces of wood that are that wide by 1/2 that width. In other words, when glued together, you got a square. In this case, I think it was around 5.5 inches before I got taking wood off. And it's glued together with a newspaper joint, so when it's all done, you can pop it back open into 2 halves. And you mount it in a regular chuck, the two of them, and you turn that half of the bowl, so it's just spinning around this axis. So you have two of them, take it out of the lathe and with the chisel in some obscure place, pop it back, pop it open, and then I didn't get all my marks out, but you go ahead and turn all of this, and you're turning air up here. And so you're turning with the center right here, and you turn that part of the bowl. And if it all works out well, you have the same center for doing the inside as you used on the outside, or else you have a varying thickness on the rim of the bowl. And there was still a lot of sanding, but a lot of sanding takes away a lot of sin. It just takes much more sanding.
How do you chuck it?
So the jig that I wanted to, and by the way, that was an inelegant segue into the jig portion of
I
tonight.
have one question.
Yeah, I was gonna ask how you chuck it to hollow the inside when.
I'm sorry, what's the
How
first
do
part?
you chuck it so that you can hollow the inside of the bowl? Because I'm envisioning that's the side. Okay. I'll be quiet and listen.
Jig.
It's a jig.
Okay.
And the jig, that I'll show in a little bit. And here it's just with the obvious off-center piece, this is not the jig, this is what the jig affects. But if you picture this mounted using hot glue.
Okay.
And there is the original prick mark right at the center from before I glued it together. Line that up with the tailstock, and as you're turning it, depending on the size lathe, you probably wouldn't even notice the imbalance on something like Powermatic. I have a jet that is about 450 pounds full up. This is probably 700 pounds full up. And mine, there's enough force in this that if I tried to operate it anywhere near the harmonic point for the lathe, it goes from a little, without changing any RPM, it goes from a little vibration into, the whole lathe is moving upwards of an inch, and it's impossible to do anything unless I chain myself to the lathe and I'm moving with it. So anyhow, I went ahead and made a jig, and this piece of wood here. Now, nobody in their right mind would turn a piece of wood. I mean, this is just done to exaggerate the eccentricity of the, you know, the center of gravity is down in here somewhere. And so I wanted to make it so it was off-centered enough that even on this, it might still induce the vibration, so I could wow the audience with my little adapter jig. This thing here is a balancing wheel. The weight of this right here, not the weight, the moment created, you know, the foot-pounds, whatever, created by this is equal to what is created by this and the metal insert, thread insert. And so by itself, it would balance out on the lathe. But you mount something that has any off-centeredness to it, and it really gets swinging around. I don't know just what the what RPM would induce that here. On my lathe, somewhere around 300 RPM, it was going crazy.
Tim? Rick, excuse me, I don't know why I want to fight that. Rick, move over and get right in front of the chuck, so if it lets go, you catch it. Perfect. Perfect.
By God's mercy, I cannot hear squat. Speaking of squat,
Curtis is in line.
I had a late friend named Tim Atkins, that's why I was doing that. Sorry.
Curtis is in line for that catch.
Yeah, but you're closer. This way, you know, he's backup catcher.
Yeah, you'll just slow it down.
I ducked quickly.
Up down 200.
okay, so I have power.
It's down 200, so it should start slow.
That's 400. Even there, you have a hard time. You're not going to get a nice groove if you're trying to cut fine on it. If I go up to about 430 or so, it'll get the. These are on rubber pads, which makes it even more inducible. If you're on hard feet, it has to physically rock the entire frame, but on these pads, it only has to rock the center of gravity of the machine.
It's rocking the camera too.
What's that?
It's rocking the camera too.
Oh, yeah. So anyhow,
Can we take bets on how fast you'll get it up?
what's that?
Flies off.
Yeah. Take bets on what speed will actually fly off the lathe.
Well,
Are you catching?
if everybody
I don't think
first
Medicare
signs
will
an
cover that.
agreement not to hold you liable.
It's not HMO approved.
Really starts putting metal nuts on there. Shrapnel.
Well,
You'd have to have metal nuts just to
All of
stand
this
on.
I knew there was a chunk in there somewhere.
This is my actual jig right here. And we'll get to that. But the production has to be elaborate. I made about 5 of these, each one's about 200 grams. They're just lead that I poured with a piece of 3/8 rod embedded in it. I mean, the rod was there, I poured the molten lead and then turned it clean. So it's a matter of how can I balance this? And the problem we have is when you get close to balance, it can still be wildly imbalanced, but because of the friction in the lathe, even if you disengage the belt, now speaking of a jet, this has lower friction from my experience than my jet does. Anyhow, I can think it's balanced because when I let it go, it stays there. This one here, it is seeking out the bottom, but it can still be off by quite a bit, and it's really restrained from its motion by the internal friction. And so, here's where the jig comes in. Most everybody, I shouldn't say most everybody, I brought mine here, but Powermatic and Jet all ships these with all their lathes now. When you receive it, it'll have the 60-degree cone, which I owned it for about a year before I realized you could unscrew the cone to reveal 3/4-inch threads. No.
So different?
Oh, a little, it's just same diameter as this.
Okay.
It's just a little cone that you, to unscrew, you put something through this hole so it can't really rotate, and then you screw that cone off, and now you have a bearing surface that has almost no friction. This is the one here that came with my jet. And it's the same thing. I took off the cone. In fact, I never use the cone anymore. So if we put this in here, I'd rather drawbar, but I'm not sure if it's too short for this lathe. Yeah, I can't, let me get a block of wood over here, give it a whack. So it doesn't fly off. So right now it's free to rotate. I put this pin in there and it's now locked with a little bit of free play. This is a piece of Delvin. Matt was giving away Delvin about 3 years ago, so I scarfed up all I could. And this is an adapter that I turned. The female here is 3/4 10 thread. The male is 1 1/4 8. Turned using my threading jig, which I'm not going to show tonight because I showed it 8 months ago. And you see it pull the pin out, and it's much more likely to render a good result because it's really swinging freely. And so what I know just from trying it out at home, I forget the exact placement, but obviously the further away you put this, more moment it's going to create. So we have a series of them here, and then there's a roll along here in case it is not truly, I don't think the camera can catch it, but it's not, my row here is not vertical. And so the center of gravity is somewhere over on that side of a center line. But I'll go ahead and screw this lead weight in here. Even though I made a bunch, I only brought one that I know from at home. It'll do the job. Then you have little auxiliary weights, which are typically sold as bolts and washers. But here we have a 3/8 bolt and 5 washers, they're just galvanized washers.
Barry, why didn't you just bring a 1 1/4 by 8 big old nut along? Then you would need to pour the lead.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I'm challenging why you need to pour the lead. Just bring one of those big nuts for a 1 1/4 8.
Well, what I learned in school was that lead has about 2.5 times the density of steel. And so I wanted to minimize the projectile size that comes flying off.
Well, you know, gold is heavier.
Yeah, I looked into that.
You could do dental work at the same time.
Okay, it still isn't exactly there. But you know what, I'll let it go at that just because I want to get on to whoever else has a jig to show. Not to mention I have more in my box. Now I have to reinsert them. If I say this is now satisfactorily balanced, and that it doesn't get obviously bottom heavy, it kind of wants to come to rest more or less horizontal. I think I brought the wrench. I just put little flats on this thing because I encountered this same situation at home and realized I couldn't get it apart without a pair of pliers. I ran it at 700 and something at home, and nothing flew off, so let's see what happens. This is the same RPM as before. That's 400 right there. I should have balanced it more finely. The phenomenon that does come in, if you recall back in the old days when they balanced wheels, they only balanced the outside of the rim. That's considered static balancing. Nowadays they would balance weights on the inside and the outside, so you have what is called dynamic balancing, because you can be perfectly balanced around that axis. But it wants to seek out, like, these weights want to pull in that direction. This mass wants to pull in that direction. They want to come to a center here, and so it causes a flex. Just as on a car, at about 70 miles an hour in the old days, if you were out of dynamic balance, you could feel it in wheel. You can visualize it here because the whole leg starts to shake. So that little plastic piece, and I did make one out of wood, but mistakenly made it out of cross grain to make a nicer thread, and it snaps off too easily. So it has to be long grain and something like hornbeam or something if you're going to use wood. So I'm sure if you ask Matt, he says, oh yeah, I got a bunch of dough.
Amen.
And it turns beautifully. Makes a real bird's nest of black. Okay, so that is one jig. Without crowding the space, who has sent in or nobody else has a jig? Matt. That's right, I saw you bring it in. And it's a work of art.
So can you get the first photo up? Right, so this is the indexing wheel on my lathe. I have a Rikon 703040. And it has increments from 1 to 36. But I'm a self-proclaimed math nerd, so that's not enough intervals for me, because that only lets you do even divisions of, well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 9, 12, 18, and 36, and that's it. So I wanted to figure out a way to do more divisions. And what I went with, because I wanted to do odd numbers and prime numbers, I made a wheel that uses bicycle spokes, or bicycle cogs.
It's like an escape from Star Trek.
Yeah. And if I run out of power, I can Gilligan's Island my lathe so I can pedal it. But this has 3 different sprockets on it right now. The back one here has 56 teeth, which gives me 7 and 8 divisions, 14 as well, 16. This one here on the inside is 39. That only gives me 3 and 13, but it gives you a nice prime number of 13. And this little guy is 22, so I get 11 out of that. I have one more sprocket coming that'll go behind this one that has 60, so I'll be able to get everything from 1 to 15, 1 to 16 now, and then a whole bunch in between. So it gives me a bunch of different increments, odd numbers, prime numbers, things like that. When I designed this, I wanted a way to not get in the way of my chuck head. So this actually goes on the hand wheel on the motor side. Can you go to the next photo? There you can see the hand wheel on my lathe. And if you take a look, there's the motor down below. This also needs a platform, which I'll show you in a minute, where to lock it in place. So if you look, there's 4 bolt mounts on that motor on the top side. So I needed a way to mount something to it. So if you go to the next photo, there, you can see a little better. And next one. So I attached a small wooden platform to my motor with some spacers so that it can get some space underneath it, but it's not going to hold a lot of weight because I don't want to mess with the motor alignment, but I just need something to be on the horizontal surface, and who doesn't have enough horizontal surfaces? So if you go to the next one, you can see there's spacers in there to lift it up off the motor so it's not rubbing against the motor. It still can get plenty of air underneath it. Okay, now next one. So here you can see it's mounted, how it's mounted on my lathe. This is the other component right here, which is a bicycle chain wrench. And that clamps around if you pretend this is attached, the bottom locks in, this wraps around, and then the bungee cord is what holds it tight on the lathe. So that locks into each position. I have them all numbered, and then I have one piece of the chain that I have a mark on it, so that way I know what number I'm at. So when I want to do carving or something, or like make arcs with a router, I could set it up, have it lined up where I want to, swing my arc, turn it one segment or however many I want to do, and then go to the next one and just repeat the process. And so this is the first thing I made with it, finished up last night. I'd done a similar bowl with arcs on my other lathe, but this one has 13. So it's an unusual configuration, and it's just a different way to show different prime numbers. And this
Don't
is
you have one on display at the,
I do. That one was from my Delta. That one had other built-in indexing wheels, but I forget, it was a string, I don't remember how many it has, but it didn't give you a lot of increments, really.
How do you put your arcs on that bolt?
I had made a jig to hold a router at 90-degree angles, and it acts like a swing arm. It just will bring it through. So I would have liked the proportions to be a little different, but this was the first attempt, so I was happy that everything lined up.
That's cool. Yeah. I guess you're not riding your bicycle anymore, though.
No, my cycling days are over. No, but the sprockets are relatively cheap. The most expensive part on it were all the metric bolts. The bicycle sprockets are all metric parts, so that was really expensive. I don't know if I have any other photos there. I might have one more photo.
Yeah.
There you can see how it's locked in. That's locked in on the 39th increment on that second wheel.
It's a really cool way to go deep into Nerd Kingdom.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah, I don't mind being in Nerd Kingdom. It's a good place to be.
That's impressive.
How long what led you to the sprockets? You just said,
I originally looked for other gears, just to buy a gear that had the number of teeth. And when I thought about bicycle sprockets, they're always going to be the same, so I can always use the same locking mechanism, which turns out to be the bicycle wrench.
doesn't the, as I understood, the other part, it's held in place by bungee. Doesn't the bungee allow some chatter?
You have a picture for that.
Yep, yeah, if you can go to that. Yeah, there you can see it locked in. It does if you force it, but I got it pulled pretty tight. And it's actually, you can't see it here, that motor also has bolts on the side, so the bungee goes all the way down to one of the bolts on the side. So it's all locked in. And there you can see on the other side of my lathe, there's a jig I made to do horizontal cuts. I have a little trim router mounted on it. It's actually a giant sliding dovetail, but I made it in February, and now that it's warmer, it has swelled up so it doesn't move as nice. So there's always room for improvement.
Low ramp.
Yeah. Yeah.
how is that attached to the hand wheel then? To secure the hand wheel?
One peg. The hand wheel has a hole in it, so
Okay.
I can just line it up and lock it in.
Very cool.
You just don't reach over there to stop your lathe.
Yeah, it's really terrifying when you accidentally leave it on and power up the lathe. Because I had it cranked up to like 3,000 RPM and it was spinning around buzzing. I like really panicked. So it was not a good scene. I won't do that again, I hope.
Well, you and Barry ought to get together.
Any questions?
Very nice.
Very nice.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. And I have learned by almost breaking my finger here how invisible this part becomes when it's spinning. And I swear I could have painted it orange and I still would have tried to reach right through it.
No.
And
You only do it once.
actually I wasn't reaching through it. I was moving my toe and my knuckle right here got hit by this, and I was moving rapidly enough that it didn't just, whoa, that was close. I mean, it was bang, and my hand went down, and the bigger danger was I was holding a tool.
I'm a simple kind of guy, so these are not nearly as sophisticated or complex as what we've seen.
Mike spends too much of his time actually turning and not enough
time making jigs.
not enough tinkering.
Mike's almost tinkering.
Is someone got the pictures coming up?
Yeah, just a second. I have one picture in a movie.
He's working on it.
Okay. They're basically a couple of mine are just simple sanding jigs that anybody could use. The first one here is just a round lump of spindle project with a small hole on each end, and then you take a long piece of sandpaper like you get from a Klingspor bargain box or from a reel, and I just stapled it and wrapped it around and stapled it on the other end, but it does slip a little bit, so it probably doesn't hurt for you to take some spray adhesive to probably coat your cylinder before you put that on there. But you can make them any size you want. Basically, you turn your lathe into a spindle sander. Pretty basic. And then for the next one, let's do, yeah, all right, here's a little jig that I made for the bandsaw, and basically the functionality of it is it will hold your chuck and anything in the chuck, and these are the dimensions. And it's got a 3/4 a bolt on it, and with a cheap spindle adapter that I can adapt my chuck to. Here I'm just using it as a carving stand when I flipped it over, but you can see I was moving it into the bandsaw to cut the crenellations. Then I just flipped it over to use it as a carving stand. This is handy if you got things like a bowl or mounted in a chuck that you want to cut a wave in it or something. You can do it safely by having this thing move your whole chuck. And then the other item is another sanding jig.
Mike, regarding that chuck mounting device, is that similar to the one John Beaver uses in a waveform?
Yes. Yes, and I guess I'd never seen his. Somebody pointed it out when I showed mine somewhere that it's like his. Mine is pretty unsophisticated in that it doesn't move around. There was somebody, I can't remember the name of it, they used to advertise an American Woodturner that sold something like this, and they had a fancy plate that mounted on your bandsaw that had a track on it, so you could swing an arc and you could move it along a track and get it more sophisticated. All right, here's the other simple sanding device. Turn your lathe into a disc sander by just taking an old faceplate or faceplate ring that you're not using, mount a piece of MDF on it, true it up. I use spray adhesive, and mine is about 9 inches across, so I can put on a 9.5 by 11 sheet of sandpaper and clip it out with a pair of scissors. And then something I saw Richard Raffin do, you just kind of knock together a simple table out of heavy stock like 2x6s or 2x8s or something that just drops into your bedway. It's not fastened down or anything, and then you can use that to be your platform for sanding. And it's easy to get it out of the way or to take it off your lathe and store it. That's it. That's all I got.
I have a question, Mike. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Do you find you have to true up that spindle sander that made out of wood, or does it stay pretty stable?
If you make it out of MDF, you don't need to do anything. Or if you used birch plywood or something, cabinet grade, generally I think you put it on there and it's going to be pretty flat.
So you made that out of MDF?
I can't remember. I gave it away when I sold this lathe. I can't remember whether it was a couple of sheets of cabinet plywood glued together or MDF. I don't remember.
Yes, Alan here. I did something very similar, and I used MDF, and it was very stable.
And I think a real advantage is that you can vary the speed. I have a regular 12 by 48 sander, and the disc, the 12-inch disc, the whole thing runs at at a single RPM, and if the RPM is burning your wood, you got to live with it. With this, you can vary the lathe speed so you're not getting burning.
Right.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
How's the weather down there, Mike?
It's good. Good to see you. Glad you connected with another good club.
Yeah. I guess I'll have to put up with you every month now, huh?
Yeah, there you go. Maybe Thursday, join the Thursday morning coffee hour group.
Never know.
I have a still picture and a 30-some second video of another jig. I actually made this probably 3 years ago. I think it was still during COVID, but I never brought it here because it was kind of unwieldy. It's a triangular steady rest. The vessel there is about a 12-inch deep by 7-inch diameter segmented vase. And the only hollowing it needs is to turn the flat. It's I think 24 segments per row, or blocks per row, and so there are 24 little flats on the inside that you have to clean up all the way down through to the bottom. And it was going eccentric on me and flying out of the chuck. And so I made this. The ones that you buy are pretty much circular, I believe. But just as an engineer, I know that if you can triangulate it and all the load goes directly into the vertex, it makes it for a very stable structure. So this is all wood and glue except for the 3 tires or inline skate tires, wheels that you can buy on Amazon. And these are they come in about 3 different rubber hardnesses. And for some things you want to use a softer rubber. These are about the highest. I think it's I forget what the scale is, but I think they're like 82 on whatever that scale was on hardness. It's a pretty hard rubber, but it still has a little bit of give. Okay, if you would now go ahead and show the video. Basically, you just, while it's running, you slide the 3 legs in. In this case, they are loose enough that they will slide freely. And so you just bring it in until the rubber tire makes contact and starts to spin. It's kind of like adjusting the guides on a bandsaw. You just bring it in until all 3 tires are making contact, and it didn't budge. Okay.
Hey Barry, do those tires leave marks on the outside of the wood if it's a finished surface?
Yeah, you do have to pre-turn the outside so that the facets are going around the outside and the wheels can't work. And so I just, with I think I used a large nylon cone on the tailstock and brought it up against the opening of the vase and turned about 1.5 inches of length so I could bring the wheels into bear and have it run smoothly.
Did they leave a mark on the piece?
No.
No?
I know if you're worried about it, you can get clear urethane wheels or white ones as well.
You're going to be sanding it when you're all done, but no, there were no black marks on the object, I guess, because because you're bringing it in slowly enough that they turn very freely, and so they no sooner make contact than they are going around. And so they're going around at about 2,000 RPM at a 700 RPM on a 7-inch diameter. You got either like a 2 3/8 or 2.5 inch wheel, and so they are going like 4 times as fast as the base.
Okay. Barry, we look forward to seeing your version that allows you to do a hollow form with a laser designator mounted on it.
I've screwed around with that with a regular, I got a little like, for teasing a cat. And it has a regular white flashlight, an ultraviolet light, and a red laser. And I've tried mounting that. It was just so unstable that basically it had about a 1/4 inch vibration. And it was not it didn't create a line. It caused a smudge on the object that I guess I could have eyeballed the center of it and hoped for the best, but I gave up on that particular idea.
Just mount it to your tool. Just like sharks with lasers on
Yeah. No, and I don't have I gotta buy one. I don't have there's parts of one up here, a hollowing jig. If nobody else has a jig, I'm not done yet.
The jig is not up.
The jig is not up. So I was talking about segmented turning, and I know Rick showed what he uses a few months ago when he gave a presentation on segmented turning. But for a single, now this, I just glued up yesterday just to show this here. This is a 24 segment ring. It doesn't go to any particular object, but you could build one around it, I guess. And this is 100 grit sandpaper with adhesive back like you buy on my sander, on my 12 by 48 sander. And here's another one right here. And so all you really have to do on these is knock off the glue joint. I mean, knock it down smooth so that your next layer isn't held up by the glue. And I do have a thickness sander, but maybe 1 in 3 will fracture, especially if I'm doing pretty thin ones, will fracture it just because it has this compression as it goes through there, and you can feed it in as a ring, and you get it out as 3 ring segments. So you're back to re-gluing it, and I like my thickness sander for a board, but not for something like this. And by the way, the black line on here is a thing I want to point out. If you do get into segmented turning, that pretty much implies you have a table saw. And the blade on the table saw, unless it is absolutely perpendicular to the table, is going to be cutting on a slight angle. So if before you get, normally you have like a strip of wood that is that wide and that thick by, say, that long, and you just kind of, with another part of the jig I'll show you in a second here, a number of seconds, you feed it through, flip the piece over, feed it through again, and keep on doing that, and you're just inching your way down to where it's no longer safe to hold on to it. The problem is, if your blade is off by a tiny bit, and you lay these down randomly, with no marking on them, let's just say your blade is off by 1/2 degree. Pretty easy to go unspotted. That joint, if you have one upside down than what you really should, all of a sudden you have a 1 degree gap, 1/2 degree here, 1/2 degree here. Heaven forbid your blade be off by a full degree. Now you have a 2 degree gap. You're doubling the gap. So if you just run a magic marker down your strip before you get cutting it, and when you assemble them, just the way it works out, even if I were to put, intentionally a 5-degree slope or a 10-degree slope on my blade. Putting a line on it makes it the opposite angle on the other piece, and so they go together well. Too much of an angle, and it causes a problem when you try and put compression on the ring for gluing it, because the glue acts as a lubricant, and the bevels tend to make it. Then you have a hard time. You have to get it pressed. One jig leads to another. But this thing here,
Is it Jigs Anonymous?
you put a single clamp on a workbench or some surface, and these are so high because normally a ring would only be, say, a 1/2 inch thick, but you can make a ring that is, 2 inches thick if you had mine to. And so these bumpers here are high enough to allow a pretty thick slab of wood in there. But no matter which face is rotating, is going with it, you got two faces you have to sand. Eventually, when the one becomes smooth, you may have to flip it over. Anyhow, that's a flattening jig. Rick showed one that I didn't try it at home. I know you made one. And you're making a very true cylinder, kind of like my piece had, only longer. And there's a ramp incline table that you want to make sure you don't feed it from the wrong side or it'll pull it through in a hurry. But you're basically forcing it through. It becomes a thickness sander. I don't know what kind of RPM you run on that, Rick.
About 700.
Okay. Yours is like about a 2.5 inch diameter?
Yeah.
Like a ringer washer from the old days.
Yeah, 2-ish. 2.5 inch.
Yeah.
Hey Barry, I don't want to get you sidetracked too much, but why do you segment guys choose table saw rather than chop saw to cut your segments? Is that a bigger question than a simple answer?
A chop saw, first of all, I don't trust the indexing or the angle setting on it, and frankly, it's pretty unsafe unless you're going to be making a separate jig then for the chop saw. Assuming you're talking about a 12-inch chop saw. I know they have an inch, and I guess even a 7.5 inch, but the 12-inch, there's just a lot of danger going on there. And I would not trust feeding a strip of wood. I'd be throwing away much bigger scrap ends than with the table saw. The table saw, I have enough confidence that I can run it right on down to maybe 3 inches of scrap.
The other thing is the blade on the table saw versus the blade on a chop saw. There's a lot more moving parts in that blade orientation. So there's a lot more chance, like Barry was saying, about getting a flex in the blade and getting wonky cuts versus on the table saw, it's a more stable cut.
And I guess I may be overly familiar with table saws. It's 60 years I've been using a table saw. I've been using a chop saw for about 20, but mainly for cut a piece. For making segmented bowls, Freud makes a 10-inch table saw blade that is 90 teeth with very little rake on them. They make it says on the blade, I don't know how to trust it, but it says it produces a 200 grit finish on the cut. Now, that's probably true on ripping, but ripping also, you burn wood. I mean, these blades have almost no side clearance, and so they're really meant for cross grain only. But they do make an awfully smooth finish. There's no sanding required or cleanup. as long as you don't have chatter going through the blade, it comes out ready to glue. And as far as going through the blade, this is, as far as I know, wholly of my own device. It's an angle setting jig for cutting the segmented pieces. I don't know how the camera can pick up on it.
That's good.
But, step one is, before drilling all this hole pattern in here, I go ahead and sit it on my table saw, and I find these very useful in my shop, little digital inclinometer. And so, first thing is validate that your table saw and the base here are at 0. You hit a little reset button and it zeroes it out, whatever it is. So that's your 0 reference point. And if you know, like say you're doing an 8-sided segment, you know that 22.5 degrees is what you have to have as your cut angle. And so you can go ahead and, for the first occurrence, and you can't trust this because we didn't zero it out. But anyhow, you go ahead and set this to the 22.5 degrees. And then clamp it in place there. This is only the first time when you're making this thing. Clamp it in place, and then I have a little plexiglass or acrylic window with several holes in it to accommodate different angles. Once you have it at where you know it is 22.5 degrees, you pick one of these holes and you drill through this plywood, and it will produce one of these holes here. And I have these all numbered here based on how many segments you'll use here instead of, 8-sided, 10-sided, 12. And you have to have them go this way sometimes just because otherwise the holes are too close together and they're overlapping each other when you get to the high count. So you go ahead and say you're doing 8, you put that boy in there, and you're tighten down on here, and there you're set for cutting 8 sides on a segmented piece. The other component to this that I didn't bother bringing is the part where your blade is in a table saw is called the throat. And there's a metal or a wooden or, in my case, a plywood piece of wood that fills that. It's called a throat plate. And you make a special throat plate that has glued onto it, just clear of the blade, a bevel strip of wood. So as you cut off a piece, the wood is not sitting there chattering on the blade. The slope of wood causes it to fall away, and so you can it's almost that fast, and you're just going through, and you can make hundreds of pieces in a hurry. Gluing is a whole different matter, but you can make your segments in a hurry. And the hard part is, to make sure what you want to do is put them in bins or glue them off one ring at a time, or all of a sudden you realize, man, this piece is awfully similar to this piece, and I just glued that piece in with here, and now I got one that's part of an 8-inch diameter, and it's really suited for 6 inches, and so my circle doesn't come back to me. And then you're breaking the joints apart, and mercifully it's all end grain, so it's not hard to break the joint. So that's my segmented turning aid jig. finally, yes, finally, I have one more which is entirely derivative of Jim Duxbury. You see a show of hands for how many know Jim Duxbury? Okay, he's where is he, Ohio? I think he's somewhere in the Midwest. Anyhow.
I thought it was North Carolina. North Carolina.
I think, okay. Yeah,
he's in North Carolina for sure.
Okay, thank you. Anyhow, he showed a thing on Coffee Hour about 2 years ago, I guess, or 3, maybe longer, I don't know. And conveniently, his last name is Duxbury, and he just goes by Dux, D-U-X. And so this thing he made, he calls a Dux Chuck. And my device is derivative of that. I made a Dux Chuck, and the problem I had with it, what it amounts to is, mine actually, and this is not what Jim Duxbury made, but his does not get clamped like that. You take 2 of your jaws off of a 4-jaw chuck, and you put a block of wood between those 2 jaws, and the block of wood has a particular diameter hole. And the bigger you can make the hole, the better you are if you're going to live within. This is for offset turning, by the way. So anyhow, when you close the jaws, it tries to compress the slot. And this thing here, this is a 2-inch diameter, exactly. This is 2 1/8. But it goes in here pretty snugly. And Duxbury's, he has his index markings along the outside, like say every 15 degrees. And so if you want to do a 5-sided turning, you would use the index lines that are every 72 degrees. And you would rotate, and his would have a prime index line on this piece. There would not be this rim on here, it would be a cylinder. And you have a prime index line on the cylinder. And so it started at no offset, and just like at the 0 setting, and turn it. And here, this one I have right here is on a 3/4 inch offset. So as it goes around, you're going to be tracing out a 3/4 inch offset. So your work is going around. And it's not enough of an offset to require any kind of special balancing technique. You can run this at, in fact, at a 1-inch offset. I had it at around 600 RPM on my jet, and it was annoying, but it didn't fly loose. For my device, basically there is a 0, 1, and so you chuck this in all 4 jaws. When I tried using Duxbury's, I had a problem with, the impact of the wood coming around, and you're hitting it once per revolution, is impacting on the workpiece, and it tends to want to advance or retreat in the chuck, at least when I made one. And no matter how much I tightened it down, when I was all done, that prime line had moved as much as 10 degrees. And so I had, instead of creating a straight offset, I was cutting kind of a spiral offset because it was advancing as I worked the wood. And I couldn't get it to not do that, no matter how tight I got it. And so I thought, how can I, fix it in place? And so this right here would get put in all 4 jaws. It will work in that, but it'll work in the stronghold. But the stronghold has straight jaws. And this one I turned with for a Vicmark 120, which has I really like to me it just feels safer having this 15-degree dovetail kind of mount. You put it in the chuck, put this in there, and you start off by truing your work. This version, this spindle right here is if I'm going to be turning like boxes. If I want to turn like a 5-sided box, you'll turn the outside as a 5-sided piece and then switch over to not being off-centered and turn the inside. And so looking at it end on, you have a pentagon, not really a pentagon, they're curves running along a larger radius than the piece itself is. But the inside of the box is just round, of course. You can't cut off-centered interiors. Not that I can think of, unless you have a Rose engine or something. And so, for doing spindle work, it's just a cheap chuck. I'm not a chuck. Drive center that I cut down. It's only going in here about this far. I cut down and glued in place. And so, from a rectangular spindle block, I first turn it round, and then if I want to make, like, say, a 3-sided lathe tool handle, in cross section you got kind of, there's a corporate logo that uses that it's not truly a triangle, it's like an arc, and an arc, but they form vaguely a triangular form. And so after I turn it into a, say, a 1 1/4, 1 1/2 inch diameter, I can then turn the 3 facets on it by this one here is only a 1/4 inch offset. So if I have a blank for a tool handle, it would wind up being from the points of the 3 lobes that you'd be holding in your hand, it would be like 1.5 inches in diameter, and the smallest area of it would be 1 inch diameter. So you'll start off with all this labeling on here, come around to in the camera, see that I have 3 colored lines on here. So this is the 0, this is the starting hole for whether you're going to do 2 sides, 3 sides, 4 sides, 5 sides, 6 sides. This will be your starting point. You'll turn it, and the whole thing is going around and a 1/4 inch off center. And so you're cutting on it, and you're turning, you're only hitting, you work it down, so you're cutting 1/3 of the surface. And then if there's going to be 3 sides, the numbers on here, 2 of 3, 2 of 4, I'm sorry, 2 of 5, 3 of 4. They're just little indicators for advancing it. The whole pattern on this accommodates 2-sided, 3-sided, 4-sided, and 5-sided offsets.
Hey, Barry, how do you lock it in so while you're turning it doesn't rotate? Is there a locking mechanism?
Well, it does. I have to put the big jaws on here. A stronghold chuck will hold it, and it compresses it so that it does not, it can't come out.
Oh, it doesn't. So it won't rotate is what you're saying when it's squeezed in there.
Well, you're going to back it off slightly so that this is free to rotate.
Okay.
You're going to pull it out free of, there's a pin here, a 1/4 inch diameter aluminum pin. That's an indexing pin. And so you put it in the desired position, and you always start it off on the 0, which is just labeled, I use color coding here for 3-sided, 4-sided, and 5-sided. And so you go ahead and, with it pressed in there, and then you tighten the jaws on it, it's going around, a 1/4 inch off center. And so you're only really hitting wood, starting off just barely scuffing it, and you keep working until 1/3 of your surface has been affected by the cut. And then if you're doing spindle, you're going to back off your tailstock so you can pull this thing out. And by the way, if you are doing spindle, you want to mark with a magic marker or something one of the spurs on the drive, because you don't ever want to rotate the piece with respect to the spurs. Put a mark on your piece, put a mark on your spur, and what rotates is the spindle piece and this all as a unit. You don't move them with respect to each other. So you're just rotating the work and this to the second position, and then locking it in place. And you're going to cut make your second cut, and then rotate it to its third, back it off, rotate it to its third position.
When you say back it off, you mean loosen the...
I mean, if you have a spindle piece in here, loosen the tailstock enough so you can be clear of this, the aluminum piece here.
Gotcha.
There's a little aluminum spud sticking out here, about 1/4 of an inch. Okay.
I see it. Yeah, I see it.
Okay. And that spud is 1/4 inch, in this case, off center. I also have one that is 3/8, half, 5/8, 3/4, and then one that's 1 inch, but it's ridiculous. So anyhow, you're going to say your first cut will be where you're in that position. And after you turn 1/3 of the surface, assuming you're going with 3 sides, you advance it to where it's 2 or 3. Okay, so right there it's been advanced 120 degrees. And it's locked there. And so you bring your tailstock back in and you press it in tight. And again, you never move the spurs with respect to the wood. So I have another drive just like this that I use to beat before tooth impression into the wood. You really want to have a positive engagement. And so you go to your second position, do your second cut, and you can cut tapered or whatever. You can also cut from offset to no offset. It starts off being 3-sided, and as it works along, you're dulling out those 3 facets. And by the time you get down here, you're running round. So like for a tool handle, you're transitioning from back where your hand is and you're holding on to 3 lobes to round up here where you want to put the piece of pipe on or whatever as a security feature to make sure your tool doesn't fracture the handle.
So Barry, how then, if you want your 3 lobes to continue the entire length of the spindle, do you flop it over, or how do you?
Okay, if you want to have it continue as 3 lobes, you do it the old-fashioned way of, normally with offset turning, you would decide, okay, I'm going to do 1/4 inch offset. And so at each end of the wood, from a center point, you're going to go ahead and draw a quarter-inch radius, a half-inch diameter circle. And you will, in the best of times, eyeball and prick mark the 0 point, a second point, and a third point as best as you can, 120 degrees apart. And I'm sure there's a better way than this, but you then draw a line that lines up with that point down the outside of the spindle and carry it around to the tailstock. And this is not my choosing. This is the way I've seen old-time offset turning getting done. And so you have the same 3-hole pattern of prick marks on both headstock and tailstock. And you just, you are physically, the spindle is staying in place, but your wood is moving on it. I've only ever tried that one time, and I guess I didn't have I know I didn't have the tailstock run in tight enough, and so the spur came free. And once it comes free, you're kind of screwed. You've smudged the 3 prick marks, and you're trying to redo them. And I just didn't like how you did it. Now there are people who I'm trying to think of the woman's name. I think her first name might be Barbara.
Yeah, Barbara Dale.
Yeah.
She does a lot.
And she would, as if she was a French chef being presented a hamburger, turn her nose up at any kind of jig. Again, kind of like me with carbide scraper versus, or like me and Jim, carbide scraper versus they produce a similar result, but one is done by a professional, one is done by one who wants to learn sometime later down the road. Meantime, I'll use a scraper. So in this case, it is, I won't say it's foolproof, but it's fun to use. Any other questions on?
So, so Barry, so what if you want to do it with that jig, you put another jig on the tailstock? I'm following. How do you keep
on the tail end? You do go ahead and make the circle. The same as you always would, like a 1/4-inch radius circle.
Okay.
As a pencil line, and you don't worry about it rotating this way. That's all been dictated by this. All you worry about is making the point down here land on that line. You don't care if it's landing on the line at exactly 120 degrees. It's what naturally lines up with this. And so as long as your point down here is landing on that circle, you don't worry about it being at one of the 3' or 4' locations. You just run it in and drive it down so that this piece is tight against it here. And even when it's a sloppy fit, the diameter of this absolutely has to be a good fit. But if these holes here have a little bit of free play, it probably is a few thousandths of an inch of free play. That's not important because almost right away, it's going to get driven to where it's making contact. And it's not going to go any further. So even if it's only an 1/8-inch pin and a 1/4-inch hole, rotate it until it's making contact in the right direction. And and you're on free. Believe it or not, that's the final jig I have to show.
This week.
Is there anybody else out there?
I just want to mention, Barbara wrote a book, I think, about off-center turnings. That's like the Bible of off-center turnings. I thought I had it. I can't find it on my bookcase right now, but it was a good little book.
Yeah, I know we don't have it here. I've seen pictures of her results. I have never seen her actually turn, but it is just astounding what she can do. But as far as I know, off-center multi-axis turning, I shouldn't say off-center. It is all off-center, but it's multi-axis. All kind of, helical kind of twists as it goes around, and it's amazing. And this Jim Duxbury, who makes his Ducks Chuck, has done some amazing work too, mainly on spindle, but I've seen he makes almost like an automobile crankshaft. They're so offset with the cut so clean. That's something I really have to work on, is how to get a clean incision going in without tearing any fibers up.
And then there's Derek Weidman, who does.
Right.
I said, and then there's Derek Weidman, who does his off centers, but they're more animated for his animal heads and so on. They're the multi-axis.
Yeah,
they're amazing.
I'm what you call a gimmick guy. When you get it to work for you, you don't screw with it too much. Artists go ahead and say, hey, I can tweak this, and I can get this kind of result.
Yeah.
It's kind of like when I see the works of, can't believe I'm dropping his name here, one of our founding members with his Rose engine.
Ray.
Yeah, Ray. When you see Ray's stuff, all I can do is just, I made a Rose engine one time, and it was called the MDF Rose engine. And basically it's just a rocking headstock that is driven by cams. And so you can produce as many patterns as you want to make in little rosettes. The true Rose engine that Ray has, I think he said you can plan on investing a total of like $40,000. I think he has a lot more than that in his. It's about that big, and it doesn't actually do turning at all. You can do turning, but then this is what's called it's an ornamental turning society. And people that belong to it also know how to do watch case engraving, like old-time pocket watches. The same technique is used to make the elaborate spiral work that you see etched into gold in the cases. And for that matter, on postage stamps in the old days, they used to have a pattern, and some money did too, to make it hard to duplicate. And it was a Rose engine that made all those kind of things.
Yeah, Barry?
Yes.
This is Randy. Yeah, I have a Ducks Chuck that I made some time ago.
Oh, there you go.
And see if I can get it apart. This is basically what it looks like.
You take two of the jaws off the truck.
You take two of the jaws off and you clamp it. And I marked, I hope you can see that.
Yeah.
That I marked where the jaws actually fall. And this is the insert that goes in it. I made these inserts with a hole saw. I drilled a 1/4-inch hole in both pieces with a drill press. Then I put the center pin of the hole saw through it. Then I clamped it in a chuck, turned it absolutely round based upon that hole, and then I put it together like this. And it has 12 segments on it. This has 12. If you look at it, it's marked. I can do 2, 3, 4, and 6-sided with this.
And the Ducks Chuck achieves its offset feature while you're sliding the actual board. And Duxbury uses a drill bit, like say, offset by a 1/4 inch. he'll use a drill bit, and he has a little, you didn't put a stop on yours, did you, Randy?
I did not yet.
There's a little, Westbury has a little stop on his, and so when you're zero, when you're on center, the stop is right up against one of the two jaws on the chuck. And if you want to be a 1/4 inch off center, he takes a 1/4 inch drill bit, loosens the jaws, and slides the board over until the drill bit will pass between the stop and the jaw. Then you tighten it down, and that's your 1/4 inch offset, and so on. You could do any offset you want by, if not a drill bit, with some piece of wood or whatever that is your standard for offsetting it. It's a whole separate world of wood turning, I guess, and like I said, I just go for the single gimmick.
Barry, I suspect that once you're done making the jig, you go on to the next one, right? You don't spend a lot of time turning with that one.
That's true, but you're all familiar with the Dyson vacuum cleaner. The inventor of that, James Dyson, I don't know him well enough to call him Jim. He was on Stephen Colbert's show about 2 weeks ago, and when Colbert said to him, "So you're an inventor, tell me about that process," and he said, "Inventors succeed by failure." He said, the Dyson that you're using on your floor, or you're using in a bathroom to dry your hands, was not the first one he made, nor was it the second. He's probably exaggerating, but he said, slightly over 5,100 variations I hit upon what exists in mass production. He produced earlier versions, but he kept on improving. And I feel any jig that I've ever shown up here, except for this one for sanding flats, that was kind of a dead giveaway. But everything else you'll see old screw holes and glue impressions and what have you, because I made it and it looked great, and all of a sudden I went to adjust something and I realized you can't turn this screw because it's, it's kind of like a hidden screw head or something, or I have to move something around, I have to reshape something. And you find out something that limits its use. And Lord knows on my spiral jig, I'm on version 7 right now, and I've stopped for now. But it just as you all enjoy turning, I enjoy turning, but I enjoy making jigs more. And I think that's okay. Some of you who enjoy turning might enjoy repairing a car engine even more, and that's okay. Whatever floats your boat as long as it's legal at the time you're doing it.
Thanks, Barry.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barry.
Thank you, Barry.
We can get out of here early.